Genesis 43, now that you can hear me here and around the world. All right, well, wow, full house this morning. This is awesome. Last week we were a little thin, so I'm glad you're all back. And not in the good ways. None of us were thin in the good way. I didn't rub you. I guarantee you. I love you, my brother, but not that much. All right, welcome. All right, Genesis 43. If you haven't been to Sunday school class, the way we typically do this is I'll start on the verse I want to start on reading, and then we just kind of read around through the rows. So TJ will go and we get to the end of the row, and then Bob. And then if you're not comfortable reading, you either say pass or just don't say anything. The person next to you will figure it out ere long and start. Okay, and when I go, whose turn is it? And it's not any your turn, just somebody say yours, because I always forget when I come in. And then I tend to interrupt, and so that's just part of the role. Genesis 43. So we left off last week in Genesis 42, conveniently enough. And so what we talked about was Joseph actually in Egypt. He's been in Egypt for how long? Anybody remember? Long time. Let's start at the beginning. Okay, he was how old when he got sold into slavery? 17. He was how old when he stood before Pharaoh? 30. Thank you. A good call in the back. So he's been in Egypt for 13 years at that point. How many years of really great bumper crops did Egypt have? 7. So he is 37. So he's been in Egypt at that point for, I know it's early, but 37 minus 17? 20. Good. All right. And then there was probably a couple years of famine that had already transpired. Probably 2 is what we're going to go with. So at this point, anybody remember how old he is? 39, thank you. And he's been there about 22 years. So 39, 40 years old. He's been there 22, 23 years, give or take. His brothers come down, and they're coming down to buy grain. Hey, kiddo. And they get down there. He recognizes them. They haven't changed that much. But he went from 17 to 39, and he went from being a Jewish boy to an Egyptian pharaoh. Big change. And so they don't recognize him between the ponytail and the guy liner and the thing that they wear. Just completely different than anything they would have anticipated he looked like. So he gets down there. He recognizes them. They do not recognize him. And he is dealing with them through an interpreter and a little bit on the brusque side, even though his emotional attachment is there with them. He is emotional at this kind of reunion, though it's not a full reunion because they have no idea they've been reunited. And yet he's still a little bit brisk with them. But at the end of the turn, he sends them back on their way. He keeps one of them behind in prison. Anybody remember who? No, Benjamin wasn't there to begin with. Simeon, thank you. He keeps Simeon in prison, and he tells them, look, to prove that you're not spies, when you come back, it's not really an if, there's no place else to buy food in the world. So when you come back, bring your youngest brother, Benjamin, that you mentioned, and I will let your older brother, it's not the oldest. Remember who's the oldest? Reuben, good. He said, I'll let Simeon go. So anybody remember where Simeon fell in this whole line? I know I'm really stretching you here. Second. Okay, so you have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. And the first 4 sons, all of who? Leah. Good. Okay. Wow, yeah, we should probably read more. This quiz thing ain't working. All right, so as we pick up in 43, what we're going to see now, and remembering that Benjamin was Joseph's biological brother. He had the same mother, same father. Jacob had how many wives and concubines total? Right, 2 wives, 2 concubines, so 4 in total. Rebekah, his mother, Joseph's mother, had only 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin. Good. All right, so chapter 43, we pick up on the run up to them going back a second time. Now the famine was severe in the land.
And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food.
And Judah spake unto them, saying, the men did sorely protest unto us, saying, ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you.
If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will
Okay, for Judah, this is real simple, right? Pop, we're going with Benjamin or we're not going. Because if we don't take Benjamin, they're not selling. You know, I mean, Joseph still, I mean, as the guy who makes the rules, he can decide not to sell you stuff just because. You know, he could actually decide to kill you just because. So he doesn't have to sustain life. He's like, Pop, no Ben, no go. There's no point in us wasting the trip. My turn already? Oh, okay.
And Israel said, why do you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell the man whether you had another brother?
But they said, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and about our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him, according to these words, could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother down? And so if you've been tracking this story, and it's interesting to see how this story unfolds and develops, if you read into chapter 42, the conversation that's recorded between Joseph and his brothers is not very exhaustive. The conversation that his brothers relay with their father expands a little bit, and now that a year later they're having this conversation again, it expands still further, and you really get the sense, here's Joseph in this reunion with his brothers, asking them very specific and detailed questions, which they probably thought, you know, like anything else that we fill out, you know, we love government questions, don't we? You know, how many of you like to take the survey and go, none of your business? And some of you do, and that's fine. You know, but here's Joseph, same thing. And his brothers are like, you know, Pop, how could we have known? When they asked, do you have a father? How could we have known that everyone is going to? When they asked, do you have any other brothers? How would we have known that this is going to, you know, and you don't. It'd be like you asking one of my kids. You see you see 3 boys. Hey, do you have any other brothers? I mean, one, that's a dumb question. It's already a big herd. And then, you know, yeah, we got a couple more hanging around. Okay, well, let me have one. You know, I mean, who sees that coming? And so they were not wrong in that, but they're like, yeah, we just had no idea. But you get the point that Joseph was making very specific inquiries, generally enough not to raise any red flags, but he was getting the information that he wanted as a person. He wanted to know Dad's okay. He wanted to know my brother's okay. You know, Benjamin and he are roughly 2 years apart, so they were probably close, and he wants to know. But they couldn't have known that this was going to play out, and it's true they couldn't have.
Then Judah said to Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise.
Whoa. Yeah, we're 11. Oh, sorry, 7. Oh, so it's even worse. No, verse 8. I just read 7. I was at 11. So you were right. I was wrong. See?
I had my finger right on the verse while you
I could see. Go.
Then Judah said to Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones.
And I will be surety for him, and of thine hand shalt thou require him, and if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever.
For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned this second time.
I love that. Dad, if we'd quit arguing, if we'd have just gone, we'd be back already. You know, here we're debating this, and we could have been back.
And their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry them down, the man a present, a little balm, and a little honey spices, and nuts and almonds. Take double the money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned to the amount of your sides. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and arise, and go back to the man.
And may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved.
So the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand, and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph.
And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, bring
So you can imagine now all of this is transpiring in Egyptian, not in Hebrew. So he turns to his steward. Not bad. Now he's got a guy ruling his house. Just where he was once upon a time. He says, look, we're going to take these guys home for lunch. We're not going to eat them. We're going to eat something else. And get that ready, take them home. And so all of a sudden, now soldiers appear. And the steward of Joseph's house says, come with me. Off they go, heading for Joseph's house. Would you be a little panicky? Just a tad. So it sounds like a great invitation because we know what's going on. But in their sandals, they have no idea what's about to happen or what's going on at all.
And the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and call upon us, and take us for bondmen and our asses.
So at the door of the house, they said unto the servant in charge, if you please, sir, we came here once before to buy food.
But it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand.
And we have brought down another money in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks.
And he said, peace be to you. Fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. And I had your money, and he brought Simeon out unto them.
So he goes, hey guys, what does that say about Joseph's testimony in having an Egyptian head of household who is identifying with God? I mean, he identified closer with God than Jacob did for most of his life. He's like, God, the God of your fathers. Like, your God, my God, he's got you covered. I have your money. So who paid for the grain? Probably Joseph. I mean, that couldn't have cost him much, but, put it back in there. But the steward of his house is like, hey, guys, trust God. This is all covered. He's got it. Didn't really help their nerves, but he was trying.
So the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed.
And they made ready the present against Joseph, came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there.
When Joseph got home, they took the gifts into the house to him, and bowed down to the ground before him.
They bowed down to the earth before him. Do you remember the dream? How many sheaves of grain bowed before Joseph's? 11. That's significant. Last time his brothers came down, they did bow before him. He was the ruler of Egypt after all. How many were there? 10. So, partial fulfillment. A year later, all 11. And they're bowing down. So, very literal fulfillment of these prophecies going on. And so they're there, they bow down, and they're good. I'm going to keep reading. We're going to run out of time. Is it me? Then he asked them about their well-being and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?
And they answered, your servant our father is in good health. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves.
And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin and his mother's son, and said, is your younger brother, whom you speak of, unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son.
Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber, and he wept there.
And he washed his face and went out, and refrained himself, and said, set on bread.
So, very emotional Joseph. He's going to go. I mean, it just does not do, especially with the ruse that he has got going right now, to, boo-ha right in front of them, plus all of his house. So he goes off somewhere, he cries, he washes his face, he puts on his guy liner again, because there's no culture that's figured out how not to make that run. And he goes back in, serve lunch. 32.
So they set a place by himself, and then by themselves. And the Egyptians who ate
So this is kind of a very formal lunch. This is not, finger food. This is Joseph alone at the head table because he is the head. And you've got the Hebrews over here, and you've got the Egyptians over here, and you've got, servants running around, but it's kind of a boundaries everywhere that's going on. So you can understand the dance that Joseph is kind of doing here. He's got his brothers here on one hand, and yet he is Egyptian, on the other hand. And so he's got cultural norms he's fighting. He's got familial ties. He's got a lot going on. And so they get ready and they serve. 33. Ah, thank you. And they sat before him, the firstborn, according to his birthright, which would be Reuben. Thank you. No. Yes. Sorry. You're right. And the young, you're right. You should just come up here. Let's take a seat. And the youngest, and the youngest according to his youth, which would have been Benjamin. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Astonished by what? Astonished that they're sitting in chronological order. That's impressive. I mean, because when you're talking a couple years apart, it's really hard to tell how old, if you put TJ on together, who's older? Hint, hint.
Yeah, but when you line up your kids, when your kids sit together.
Right, but they're our age. His older brothers are our age.
Your children,
Yes.
starting with Joe, Todd, they will sit in order.
No. Never. Never. If I get them to sit at the same time, it's a miracle, but no, not in order.
Joe and Todd would sit together just because.
Most days. Right. But instinctively, no, they don't. They just all over the place. And yeah. No.
Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs.
Hope he was hungry.
So they drank and were merry with him.
44. We can keep going. Yep.
And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack mouth.
Also, put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money. So they did according to the word that Joseph had spoken.
All right, so you get the sense Joseph's up to something again. Who put the money in the mouth the first time? Probably the steward of Joseph's house. That's how he knew what was going on. Interesting here is the cup. Which cup? The cup. the cup. This is a cup of singular import in this household. We don't know anything, but he said, put the cup. Joseph's up to something. He didn't even tell the steward necessarily what he's doing. Just, but the steward's like, whatever, Joe's in charge. I do whatever I'm told. So, funky, but we know he's up to something. Divination. All right, so the one what? The one cup. This is that cup. So regardless of, what does it mean that he practices divination? What did the cup significance mean to him as an adult that, God was able to speak to him through? I don't know. This is a cup of there's some mystery here. What was he using it for? It was singularly important. He drank out of it. That much is certain, which is good. Cups are good for that. I just went and got mine. But it's not the cup. It's just a cup. But he's, this is his, how many of you have a favorite mug? Like all you coffee addicts, get your hands up because I know you do. I know I'm weird, but I'm not that weird. So it's the cup. And I have 2 cups. One if I'm home and one if I'm running. But the cup. Go get me my cup. My kids know. Yeah, they don't even really ask which cup. Okay. It's the one that sits on top of the coffee pot for ease of access. Why put it away? I need it. And so he said, here, go get my cup. So we get this. Is it me? So he overtook them, he being the steward, and he spoke to them these same words.
And they said to him, Why does my Lord say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing.
Behold, the money which we found in our tax mouth we put again into thee out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of the Lord's house silver or gold?
With whomever your servant is found, let him die, and we also will be my Lord's slave.
Okay, bad negotiating tactic. Just kill whomever, and the rest of us will be yours. Okay, the guy wouldn't be there unless he was relatively sure you probably took something. So, I mean, they're real confident they don't have it. But they didn't know they had it last time. I'm not sure they should have stepped out onto this limb with the saw back there somewhere. But they did.
And he said, Now also let it be according unto your word. He with whom it is found shall be my servant. He shall be like us.
Okay, so nobody's got to die. Whoever it's found with, they're my slave. The rest of you can go. Where's it going to be found? Anybody know without reading? Oh, we know that's coming, don't we?
So he searched. He began with the oldest and left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack.
So suspense, because he knows where it is. Suspense. I'll start over here. Make it work, make it work, make it work, make it work. You know, so, you know, each time there's a measure of relief and yet a measure of tension that gets ratcheted up because is it going to be found? And, of course, right at the very end. In verse 13, then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. There was a lot of people going, oh, Smurf, of course. Why him? And they're like, all right, let's go back. You know, they're not, can they leave Benjamin there? Can they just give Benjamin to the steward and go home? Yeah, that'll fly real well with Pop, won't it?
So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. 50.
And Joseph said to them, What deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination?
And Judah said, What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he, and also with whom the cup is found.
Far better to never see Dad again than to go home without Benjamin. That's where they are.
But he said, Far be it from me that I should do so. For the man whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for you, go in peace to your father.
He's toying with them.
But Judah came near unto him and said, O my lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word unto my lord's ears. Let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh.
Sir, you ask us, do you have a father and you have a brother? He answered, We have a father who is old, and we have a brother born to him in his old age. The boy's brother is dead, even the only one of his mother's children still alive. His father loves him very much. Then he said to his servants, Bring him down to me, that I may set eyes on him.
And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die.
But you said to your servants, Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more.
So it was when he went up to your father. So it was when he went up to your servant, my father, that we told him the words of my lord.
And our father said, Go again, and buy us a little food.
But we said, We cannot go down if our youngest brother is with us, and we will go down. For we may not see the man's face unless the youngest brother is with us.
And thy servant my father said unto us, We know that my wife bare me 2 sons.
One of them has already left
Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life,
It will happen, when he sees that the lad is not with us, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant our father, with sorrow to the grave.
For your servant became
surety.
for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever.
Now therefore, I pray thee, let thy servants abide instead of the lad as bondsmen to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren.
For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father?
Now, is this an interesting chapter? I mean, it reads very quickly, and that's intentional. It's interesting to me. The most interesting thing is who was trying to save Joseph's life 22 years ago? Reuben. Whose bright idea was it to sell him into slavery? Judah's. Reuben wasn't there when they sold him into slavery. It was Judah's idea. It's interesting that 22 years later, plagued undoubtedly by guilt, that the person who is interceding the greatest for Benjamin would be Judah. Interesting how that kind of works on it, isn't it? You got to wonder what it was like to be the guy who led the charge to sell your sibling into slavery. My guess, and this is just a guess based on knowing human nature and what we read here, that it plagued Judah for 22 years. That he would now be in a case where he's standing before a guy who could, with a word, end his life, and he steps out boldly begging for the life of his brother. Take me, don't take him. You're going to kill my dad if you take him. And so it's just an interesting kind of turnabout in a couple decades. So keep going into, do we have time to go into 45 at all? It's like 17 of. Let's see, where can we get to? What the heck, let's go.
Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren.
So here's Judah. Picture this now. They're in Joseph's, probably in his great hall. Joseph is probably sitting on something that is a small throne, essentially, in his own hall. He's making this case, probably through an interpreter. Joseph's still dealing with them in Egyptian. Joseph's brothers probably don't speak Egyptian. And so this whole thing, it's been very eloquently stated, but probably through an interpreter. Now, Joseph gets it twice because he does speak Hebrew. They just don't know that. And Joseph is very moved by Judah's speech. I mean, it was a good speech. And so he clears the room. Everyone out. And so the steward's like, all right, everybody out, let's go. And you get the guards marching out, the steward marching out, and they close the doors. Then we get to verse 2. Okay, emotion just bubbled completely over. I mean, this is legit. He's been holding it in as much as he could, as long as he could, and it just, like a volcano, it's like Iceland all over again, right? You guys read the news? There's a volcano in Iceland getting ready to go. Okay, so just burst out, and he's just crying and sobbing, and I mean, this is as undignified, unmanly as it gets. And he's making such a big noise about this that all the people that just left the room can hear it. Probably the steward's like, cup to the door, probably, because and the guards aren't far behind, just in case, because if you got somebody who is the stature of Joseph and you're his Secret Service assignment and he dies on your watch, that's bad career move, right? And so, they're probably keeping an eye and an ear as much as they can on what's going on. And he is just, verse 3. dismayed. So terrified. I don't think there is a word in any language to describe where they were emotionally. I just don't think one exists. I mean, they just said, but Judah just said that he was dead. For 22 years, that's been their belief. He's gone, he must have died. I mean, they don't know. They sold him into slavery, and, that's all they knew. But the assumption is that he is dead. And so for suddenly this larger-than-life Egyptian ruler breaks out in Hebrew, that had to have been shocking, and then says, "I'm Joseph," and drops the pretense. Is Dad still alive? What do you say to that? Right, but this is you've got an official asking after their father officially, but this is now pretense gone. Are you sure my dad's still alive? And they're sitting there like, because there's nothing that you can say intelligently at this point. There just isn't. And there is no word to describe what they must have been going through. A lot of very conflicting emotions. As it's like, wait a minute, you're not dead, you're not, where do you even start? There's a laundry list of stuff to try to process in a very short time. So Joseph says to his brothers, "Please come near me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Look through the guy liner. Look through the Egyptian cultural clothing and everything. Look through the mask and see me." Because they had not been looking for their brother before. But he says, "Look for me. In the man that you see before you, look for your brother." Now, even a stranger, when you get that kind of invitation and you begin looking, can you see? Yeah, he's like, "I'm your brother. Look and see for yourselves." And so draws them in and they begin looking.
But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life.
Wow. Verse 5 just resolves the conflict of about the last 8 chapters. God sent me here before you to preserve life. Who sold him into slavery? Nobody. From Joseph's perspective. You didn't sell me. You didn't wrong me. Being a slave for years wasn't a burden. Being a prisoner for years wasn't a burden. Running the country for the last 9 years, okay, that's pretty cool, wasn't a burden. Because why am I here? To preserve life. And not to preserve the Egyptian's life. Honestly, I'm not sure he cared. I mean, I'm sure he did from a human perspective. But from a familial perspective, he's like, God sent me here before you. He knew you were coming. He sent me down ahead of time to make sure when you got here, there was food. Because what would have happened to Israel and his children and to their tribe and to their clan and to their people and to their nation and to the promises that God had made them had there been no grain in Egypt? Reason says they would have died. And Joseph said, God sent me down here 22 years ago as a slave so that he could work me up to this point here as a king to make sure that when you got here, there was still food. There we do have to stop. But that's cool as anything. Somebody remember we're in verse 5 because I didn't get to verse 6. We're in the middle of the paragraph. Okay, yeah, because the paragraph goes to 8. But still, but I wanted to get that far. I mean, the adversity in our lives, and we always look at it as a negative, right? How many of you have ever had a spare tire and said, well, thank you, Lord? Or a flat tire, rather. I've said thank you, Lord, when I had a spare tire. But how many of us have ever had a flat tire on the side of the road? We're late for whatever we were doing because everything in our life is urgent and important. We sat there on the side of the road with a car that wouldn't work, and we said, God be praised. Anybody? Some of us do, and that's an awesome perspective. Right. And that is That is a hard place to get to. But the reality is, if we acknowledge God is sovereign over our lives, and God is loving, and he has a plan, then us sitting on the side of the road was not an accident. We may never know what the reason is, but there was a reason. You don't know what accident you missed. It may not have happened because you weren't there. You know, there are a million things, and I think someday we'll get to heaven and God will let us, we'll know all of the possibilities, and we'll see his hand active at every stage of our life that never left our shoulders. And we will be in awe and wonder. But what a perspective that Joseph would have in this life. Guys, don't worry about it. This is a God thing. God things are cool. Oh, that we would see them. God, that we would see them more often, we pray in Jesus' good name. Amen. All right. We're going to be in